Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Could I ask you please to stand for the playing of our national anthem? Thank you. The municipality of Whitestone recognizes all of Canada resides on traditional, unceded and/or treaty lands of the Indigenous people of Turtle Island. We recognize our municipality on the Robinson-Huron Treaty Territory is home to many past, present, and future Indigenous families. This acknowledgement of the land is a declaration of our commitment and collective responsibility to reconcile the past and to honor and value the culture, history, and relationships we have with one another. All right, thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm calling the meeting to order and asking our councillors if they have any pecuniary interest to declare with respect to the item on tonight's agenda. I should also point out to you, Councillor Brian Woods is not with us. He's ill, and so we send best wishes for his recovery. Could I get a motion then, please, to approve the agenda as circulated? So I saw Councillor Lamb's hand up. Councillor Lamb moves, Councillor Gorham Matthews seconds. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate. Okay, thank you. That's carried. So first on our agenda this evening, we have two presentations. The first one is from the Whitestone Agricultural Committee, and it's a presentation of the draft of their draft animal bylaw, which you have in the package. So I'm looking at Councillor Gorham Matthews. Are you going to present this for us?
Yes, I'll give a brief overview of it.
Thank you very much. Please go ahead.
So just as a little background, during the last term of council, it was attempted by Mr. Jackson to bring forward an animal bylaw. The community wanted one to allow people that weren't zoned for agricultural use to be able to have some animals. There was concerns. The bylaw didn't really match up with the community in terms of the rural area, and some of the concerns were with odor and animals at large and such. So we struck up this committee and we started working on this. We've looked at dozens of bylaws from other communities. We went through the list of material from the public meeting that Mr. Jackson had, and we tried to address some of the concerns that people had in this draft bylaw that we've assembled that deal with noise and odor running at large. People were concerned with animal slaughter and disposal, proper care and shelters, manure management, food safety. We've addressed all this in this draft bylaw. We think it's fair. It allows people with the rural residential and the waterfront residential lots that have big enough lot to be able to raise some meat birds or whatnot. And given the price of inflation and food insecurity, this is a timely matter to look at for the community. It's been vetted by a retired police officer. We had a variety of members on this committee. Not all of them wanted animals next door to them. So it was a good exercise in making sure that we were had a balance in terms of people that were in favor and people that were against doing something like this. We did go one step farther than before, where this is more than just a chicken bylaw. There was interest from members of the community in terms of having some goats or something like that for milk in the bylaw. So we have addressed that as well. It is a draft. It is certainly not perfect. We're not bylaw writers. 4 years ago when I got on council, I thought, oh, let's write a bylaw. Much harder than I would say we anticipated. But I think we've come up with some bones that I think are workable for the community. And with the new council, can look at this and work with Mr. Jackson to make it into something that's enforceable and a proper bylaw. We probably have some wording and things that aren't consistent with a bylaw, but we've done what we feel is fair for the community and is enforceable in terms of people that are not interested in being next door to chickens or something like that. Everyone has a right to enjoy their property. So yeah, that's where it is. We're presenting that to you in terms of the committee. We're presenting this as our draft. I can't speak for all the members on the committee in terms of the future of the committee, but I know Mr. Matthews has indicated that he will continue with the committee in terms of being more of an advisory committee. If there is something that came before council that they want advice from an agricultural point of view, that he is more than happy to continue with the committee, and perhaps the other members are as well. But that's the draft. You're welcome for comments.
Okay, thank you. I guess we should just take questions and comments now. Do you think? Or go ahead, Councillor McEwen.
Thanks, Beth. I know this has been a long road for you folks. Get closer. My voice isn't too strong tonight. I'll get a little closer. I know it's been a long road to hoe for your group, and thanks for taking it on with the Agricultural Committee of Council. Before that happened, I was a bit involved with it with John Jackson and his assistant, Mr. Snowden of the day, and Dennis, and I think it came about as a public request, pretty much following the last bylaw updates and official plan, and it was just a community at large sort of concern about being able to have animals and what you could have and all that. And when I went through it, I had some questions, and thanks, Beth, I contacted you directly and you pretty well answered everything I had as questions. But lack of detail in it, which was really big back at the outset when we had the previous format with the folks I was involved in. It was really cumbersome and really hard to zero in on numbers of this and size of that and such. And I know you've used OMAFRA as a guide, and then the other was the Ministry of Agriculture and Food, I believe, as references throughout. So the protection certainly should be there for issues that could ever arise from this. And I thought it was quite well put together and appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other questions or comments? Councillor Lamb.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, it's really close. Yeah, I looked over it over the weekend, and I guess I have some concerns, but you know, this is just a draft and needs to get out into the community, although the committee may have worked on it, and I know COVID had something to do with it taking so long, because this has been on the books for a couple of years now. But having said that, there's been no real community consultation. It's been the committee, and obviously we now have to do that. And I see a number of things of kind of an executive summary of this, say in an upcoming newsletter, getting it to roads associations, putting it on our website, a number of things that we need to do from a communication standpoint. I can tell you personally, and again, this oftentimes on council, it's not your personal decision, it's what the community thinks. I have some concerns that with waterfront residential properties, and the definition, of course, is animal is lots more than a chicken. It could be a cow, I guess, or a horse, or a whatever. If it's, I guess, if it meets the standards, whatever the Ontario government is, but I don't know how the community would take roosters in a residential area. I just don't get that, but I'm not from a farm background. But so we've got to get this out. I also see that animals are free to range safely within the confines of someone's own property, but they can't go next door. So I'm not sure chickens in a residential area should be free to range on a property. I guess I have a vision of them being in a chicken coop or something and not running around. But so there's a number of things here that I think need to be communicated, and we have to come up with a plan so that we get community consultation. So it's not, I don't think tonight's exercise is to necessarily, change the draft, but just to comment on it. And again, it's a good starting point. I guess I take us back to when we did the dog bylaw. We came up with a draft on that, and then it got into the community, and there were a whole bunch of feedback and whatever, and we used that to come up with a second version of the dog bylaw. And I think it was a better and stronger document. So I think this one, has significant impact again on, in rural areas. I think it's a great document. I think where the concern will be in the community, my guess is when you get into, tight residential areas, like where I am, where, the next house is 20 yards over or something, right? That's different. So I think we need to think carefully through that, or the new council will, before they adopt this. So those are my comments. I'm not going to go through it with a fine tooth and comb, but and I thank the committee for doing what they did. Thank you.
Do you want to respond to Councillor Matthews?
Yes, just quickly, because I know we're not getting into detail on this. And I'll just comment that, yes, this did take an incredibly long time. None of the committee, the majority of the committee was not Zoom friendly. And so we didn't work on it for 2.5 years during COVID. At one point last year, we actually met outside because not all of the members of the committee were vaccinated and couldn't get into the community center. So, it's been a challenge to work on it, but we're happy to present it. And definitely it needs to go to the community now and get some feedback and fine tuning just to address the one concern about the waterfront and the close lots. They would naturally be excluded due to the close proximity to the water and the depth of their lot. Like when you get into the details of the bylaw, there would be naturally areas that do not have big enough lot to be considered. So certainly we look forward to getting the community feedback and are happy to pass it off to the new council and build on it from there. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that explanation. I see one or two things from a drafting point of view that I think probably need some attention. I believe all we're going to do tonight is receive this, but I'm just curious about the general exemption item E. I'm not sure I really understand what this means. It says, I'm assuming that what you're trying to say is that what is in each of these points is if people doing this are exempt from this bylaw. In other words, the provisions of the bylaw don't apply to them. So it says the keeping of livestock for use, propagation, or profit where they are kept pursuant to all applicable provincial and federal statutes. I mean, is this trying to say this doesn't apply to farms, or is it trying?
Right. So this section here is referring to actual farms that are registered as businesses and already zoned as agricultural use as farmland. So this bylaw is just for people that aren't already zoned as agricultural use.
Okay, I understand.
Yep.
I see where you're coming from. Okay. Yeah, because it said permitted by the zoning bylaws, but I thought, well, we had already gone through a little bit that said, well, it's conceivably possible that you could have a horse on a property that is not zoned for agriculture. It's not a farm, right? But so anyway, it's I guess what you're doing, what you're trying to say is that it's permitted by the specific zoning that's involved, not.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
right.
Okay, well, thank you. I don't know, are there any other comments or questions that
Yeah, just.
we want at this time?
Yeah, just, so as a background, right now, if I'm in waterfront residential, I can't have a few chickens in a chicken coop. I take it it's prohibited by the zoning bylaw. Is that a correct assumption?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so, because I was gonna say, where's the problem? How many problems have we had in non-farm areas of, I've heard the mayor say a problem looking for a solution or the opposite or whatever. So I guess it's not so simple as to just change the zoning to allow it without, I guess, a bylaw like this. I'm thinking out loud here. So, okay.
That would be much simpler.
What, to just change the zoning?
Yes, if you just added agricultural use under the zoning bylaw. But then
But
you lose the control.
Yeah, but I guess the thing that bothers me is that if you're going to for instance, allow roosters in a residential area, which I think a lot of people wouldn't want. I would read this as being sort of, well, it would be complaint driven or something, right? If you didn't like the rooster, you'd call the bylaw officer, right? And I guess he'd show up and I don't know what he'd do, and having my years on council, I realized that bylaw infractions and just call the bylaw person and have them corral the rooster or whatever isn't as easy as it appears when you just say it. So I'm not sure that the community will like the idea that it's allowed unless you complain or rat on your neighbor that I don't like the rooster waking me up at 5 or 6 in the morning. So I have concerns that way. So and anyway, I really feel that people in the community would generally accept a limited amount of chickens in a residential area. I think the problem becomes, and maybe again, I'm not from a farming background, maybe I'm all wet about roosters, but I think it's a real potential problem for people coming up who work all week and come up to the cottage and they're woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning from a rooster, and they'll be complaining, believe me. So, but again, if there's only going to be 2 places in residential areas where chickens are kept, then it's not much of a problem, right? So anyway, thank you.
Just in response to the question, what's the problem? It seems to me that there was, back when we had discussion about this, before the Agriculture Committee was created, there were in fact folks who wanted to have, and in fact some did have, and I believe they probably still do have, chickens. Well, I'll use goats as an example, okay? And it's on a property that used to be farmland that went right to the river. So the river's here, the house is here, the goats are behind the farmland, right? So they're not close. They would satisfy the requirements in this bylaw because they're not, they're not sufficiently close to the water to be causing any problem. And they're not sufficiently close to any neighbors that they're causing any problem, I would guess. So the question is, why should they not be allowed to do it? And that was the kind of thing that prompted this in the first place, and what, if I remember the discussion, the problem that the observation we had was that the zoning bylaw is a pretty blunt instrument. And this bylaw, and what we wanted to do is to have a separate bylaw, not the zoning bylaw, but one that could deal with the specific conditions under which you might be able to do these things that a blanket zoning would not allow, because obviously some waterfront properties they're not going to be suitable for animals, but some of them that we have are. So that's really why. That's why we went down this road. Okay, are there any other, Councilor McKim?
Yeah, just another little comment here, going back to the inception of this being brought forward, I guess. The rooster thing, that was certainly discussed, because as Councilor Lamb says, there are people who don't want to be awakened at 4 or 5 in the morning by a crowing rooster next door or on their windowsill. I know a lot of communities, they don't allow roosters. That is one thing they don't allow is the noise of roosters. I don't think it was complaint driven that got us into this as much as other communities, and it just almost became a desire of towns and villages and grown-up areas in the countryside to be able to at least have chickens or some other animals of very small nature on their private properties. So it will be interesting when we get feedback from the public and see if hopefully we don't have to start trying to play the numbers game, because I remember that. Should you have 8 chickens? Should you have 2 dozen? Should you have big ones, little ones? And besides chickens, what else should you have? So that's what I was pleased personally when I saw that we're following guidelines of Ministry of Agriculture and the and such in the policy as written. But maybe it's not specific enough. Once we get people back, we'll see. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you. If there's nothing else on this one, I think we'll move on to our second delegation, which is from the Lorimer Lake Association. And I'm going to ask our clerk, are they going to present via Zoom or how are we doing this? We have the slides in the package, so I believe, right?
Yes, hi, it's Cecilia Parks here, and I am going to be presenting by Zoom, and I'm going to be sharing my slides here. So thank you. Just give me a second and I'll bring up my slides.
You can turn your camera on too if you want, Cecilia.
Okay.
Oh, I guess it won't show.
Yeah, it might not
Maybe
show.
your slides are going to show, so I guess it doesn't matter. But
Okay.
anyway, the floor is yours. So please go ahead when you're ready.
Okay, well, thank you very much to all members of council and Mayor Comrie for allowing me to present today. And I am presenting on behalf of the Lorimer Lake Association. And what we will be discussing tonight is a few things. First of all, I'm going to be giving you the definition of what a lake at capacity is. And also, I'm going to be giving you some recent data obtained for Lorimer Lake in terms of the dissolved oxygen and calcium concentrations. I'm also going to be talking about stressors and lake planning and about the approval of an interim control bylaw, which was discussed in our last council meeting, where John Jackson did speak about an interim control bylaw versus the amendment to the official plan. I'm also going to be talking about some of our future goals. All right, so first of all, what is a lake that is at capacity? What does this mean? The ministries have defined a lake trout lake to be at capacity if the dissolved oxygen is below 7 parts per million. And Lorimer Lake has certainly had less than 7 parts per million in dissolved oxygen, all the way from 1999 when the ministries were taking the tests of our lakes right up to and including 2022. And just a little note here that the parts per million is equivalent to milligrams per liter when we measure dissolved oxygen. On this slide, you're going to see what a lake looks like in terms of its variety of layers. And the warmer layer is on the top. It's less dense and contains the most amount of dissolved oxygen. The cooler water is at the bottom and it's much denser and it contains the least amount of dissolved oxygen. So what's important to note here is that lake trout will move from the deeper, colder waters to find more oxygen when needed. And also important is lake turnover. You'll hear a lot of people talking about lake turnover. This occurs when the layers mix in the late fall and just after the spring melt. And it's very crucial for lake trout because this is when the layers mix, where of course the top layer, which has the most oxygen, mixes with the bottom layer, which has the least amount of oxygen. So the ministries and the Lorimer Lake Association, in conjunction with the Whitestone Conservation Association, have measured the dissolved oxygen in to late September. So I really want to reiterate that in mid to late September. This is when the oxygen levels are at their lowest. So the data I'm going to show you is the data from mid to late September when the oxygen levels are the lowest on the lake. And we will be highlighting the data received from the 10 to 15 meter mark. Okay, so this next slide here has a map, and you'll see here 3 different basins that are on Lorimer Lake. And basin 1 is on the east side, and it's the one with the one of the largest basins and one of the deepest basins as well. This is the basin that we have measured our data from in terms of dissolved oxygen. Okay, another really important slide here is some information with regards to what we need in terms of growth and survival of the various fish. So in terms of dissolved oxygen, if the dissolved oxygen is greater, 6 parts per million or greater, fish will thrive and grow. Between 4 and 5, it's stressful for fish, and below 3 parts per million, it is undesirable and becomes deadly with prolonged exposure. So those numbers are important just to have in mind when we look at this next slide. So this next slide shows you the dissolved oxygen data that we received from the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, and the data that was collected by the Lorimer Lake Association and the Whitestone Conservation Association. So the ministries have measured our dissolved oxygen levels up until 2013, and then we have continued to measure, and we have here our 2022 data for you. There are 2 lines here on the graph. So the one red line represents a 15 meter mark, and the other blue line represents the 10 meter mark. And I just wanted to remind you that any 3 ppm and lower is undesirable and becomes deadly with prolonged exposure to fish. So what's very interesting to note here is that dissolved oxygen has been progressively improving from its lowest level in 2000, but we are still far below the 7 parts per million from 1999 on. Once again, it's the 7 parts per million that define a lake as being at capacity. Okay, the other thing we have to look at, of course, in terms of lake quality is calcium. Fish require calcium for strengthening bones, and deforestation and climate change are some of the major causes of a decrease in calcium in Lorimer Lake. The loss in calcium can affect the growth, reproduction, and survival of many organisms, including fish and birds. And you can see here on this graph that in 2020, our calcium levels were around the 4 level mark and had gone down quite a bit from 2019. And also in 2013, we had quite low calcium levels. So this is where I just wanted to show you some of the fluctuations in terms of calcium level. And again, remind you that deforestation is one of the things that really affects calcium. Deforestation, people tend to, of course, when they buy a new lot, they like to clear their new lot. They like to clear it so that they can view the lake. And that is critical in terms of lake quality. Okay, so the next slide here shows Lorimer Lake's dissolved oxygen and Secchi depth in comparison to many other lakes in our area. And I wanted to highlight 3 lakes here because these lakes are also cold water lakes, trout lakes. And the 3 are, of course, Lorimer Lake, Trout Lake, and Fairholme Lake. And those lakes are all in Whitestone. And I wanted to show you here, this information was received from Steve Scholden and is from the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, in the Parry Sound District in 2015. And you can see here that Lorimer Lake's dissolved oxygen is a little higher than Fairholme. However, it is lower than Trout. And you can see in terms of the Secchi depth, just to have in mind, the lower the number, the less transparent the lake is going to be. And here you can see that Lorimer is quite a bit lower than Fairholme and also Trout in terms of Secchi depth. All right, and that's important. And basically, we should all have in mind that nutrient loading due to deforestation results in the reduction of Secchi depth. So clearer waters allow more light to reach vegetation, and the vegetation produces oxygen. The darker water means more algae, and when it decomposes, it means less oxygen. And as you guys all know, our lake trout need oxygen and cold water to survive. Okay, so what are the results regarding the data that I have presented to you? As you can see, Lorimer Lake's dissolved oxygen levels are well below the 7 parts per million that define a lake that's at capacity. However, our lake trout are surviving, but any further stressors due to an increase in development can rapidly change their sustainability. We have to look at more than just septic systems. A lot of the environmental consultants who have looked at severances on our lake have looked at the septic systems. And I want to reiterate, we have to look at more than just the septic systems. Our lake does have groundwater inputs, which are good in certain areas, which help to supply oxygen to the lake and the trout. That's a positive thing. And we've been working with environmental consultants ourselves who have told us this. In the past, severances have controlled and have been controlled, and we have managed to stay above the 3 parts per million from 2013 to 2022. Just to remind you again, 3 parts per million and lower can be deadly for lake trout with prolonged exposure. So the question is, how many new severances per year can be permitted without endangering our lake trout? These questions can be answered with a proper lake study. Okay, that's very important. All right, so basically, what are the environmental consultants saying? It is not just septic systems that should be looked at when we're looking to preserve lake quality. It is not just septic systems. Time and time again, when we're seeing these applications for severances, they're speaking about the septic systems. We have to look at the other stressors. And this is what the environmental consultants are saying. We have to look at social density. We have to look at the boats, the traffic on the lake. We have to look at stormwater. We have to look at the runoff from the roads. We have to look at more fishing, deforestation, climate change, and of course, to name a few only, faulty septic systems. Faulty septic systems, as we know, occur, and unfortunately, we do not have control of this in terms of the municipality can't go around inspecting septic systems. Faulty septic systems happen and they can wreak havoc on lake quality. So what are we doing? We are talking about the cumulative impact. This is what the environmental consultants are saying. We're talking about the cumulative impact. So in 1999, if we had 1 severance, in 2000, we had 2. We had none in 2021. And in 2022, we're putting 6 new severances on the lake. We have to look at the cumulative impact and how that can have a devastating impact on our lake quality. We also have to look at lake classification. That is needed. And once again, I want to reiterate, this is what the environmental consultants are saying. Okay, we have to set aside lake trout lakes early and then work with the remainder of the lakes. And this is very crucial since we are at a tipping point here. We have to look at best management practices. So social density, the number of lots, the lot frontage. And we have to manage these according to the size of the lake and the lake characteristics. And that's very important. Another final thing in terms of what the environmental consultants are saying is municipalities can drive through their own policies. So this is possible and municipalities can do this, as we know. All right, so some of the future goals. We want to work with council to freeze development for 1 year on Lorimer Lake by implementing an interim control bylaw. So this was talked about a couple of weeks ago at our council meeting. And John Jackson did tell us about the interim control bylaws. We have had a chance to think about this and to speak to some other planners about this. And we believe that this would be the right way to go. We would like to pair an interim control bylaw with a lake study focused on bringing clarity to the ministry's lake trout at capacity categorization. And we'd also like to call on the Lorimer, we'd like you to call on us, the Lorimer Lake Association, to assist you, council members, in providing data wherever appropriate. Finally, we would like to mention that scientists can be hired to look at the history of the lake and when certain events within the watershed occurred. For example, deforestation, which could have affected our dissolved oxygen content in any given year. Hey, well, I just wanted to thank you very much for allowing me this time to present. And as you can see probably and hear from my voice, myself and many people on the Lorimer Lake Association are very passionate about this. And once again, I appreciate you allowing me to share.
Okay, thank you, Cecilia. I'll open the floor here to questions for a few minutes. Anybody? Councillor McEwen.
Cecilia, do you hear me? It's Joe McEwen.
I do. I hear you perfectly. Yes.
Thanks for your information package and your explanation of it. I've done a fair bit of research in the last, especially since the last council meeting, when this was brought forward to try and make give consideration to your lake. I'm really pleased, really, that council should be and will be getting involved as time moves along here. I think it's, I wouldn't say it's past due because it's been on the docket by you folks for an indefinite period of time, and more notably within the last year, showing greater concerns. One of the issues I'm wondering how, and I'm sure you folks have thought about it and talked to a lot of people about it, and that's the McDougall connection. That's the one concern I have. Minimizing the number of severances on the lake and on not just that lake, but I think we should consider the 4 cold water lakes we have in the municipality through a study process, being Wabash Crest, Trout, Fairholme, I guess it is, and your Lorimer Lake. Some of my research was tedious but very interesting, and I hadn't, I'll be honest, done the work on it since I ran for council back in 2014, when some of your folks approached me and asked if I'd support the process we're going through to try to minimize the effect on your lake down there. And from one of the reports I read, which is a ministry report, or ministry driven anyway, in 2020, pardon me, 2010. One of the suggestions from the ministry at that time was look at maybe one severance only for property on a cold water lake. I thought that was interesting. Hearing about 4 severances or 6 severances, which could be times 3 or 4 properties, that's going to start adding up pretty darn fast. And I know that's probably a really big concern you folks have. I'm reading this and thinking that maybe you're thinking that way. I know it's going to be hard for councils moving forward, I think, to totally close a lake to zero construction or development, but to minimize it and when it does come into play, make sure the studies are done properly, the checks and balances are in place to protect it from oxygen depletion. The calcium concentrations have to be always considered, and then the phosphorus thing as well. I know technology is changing, as Mr. Jackson is first quick to point out. And we incidentally had a report from Hutchinson to our Environmental Stewardship Committee just a week ago, and they spelled out a lot of the same things that you've spelled out in your report of what the potential issues are. They figure there's ways to mitigate and get around condemning construction and development on lakes, but I'm really curious about the connection that we'd have to make with McDougall Township, since this lake is partly, Lorimer Lake is partly in McDougall and in Whitestone. Do you have any comment on that one?
Okay, thank you very much for all your comments. In terms of McDougall, they are working presently on their official plan, and the draft official plan is currently in play right now. And they have implemented in that draft official plan that there will be only 1 severance permitted on the McDougall side of Lorimer Lake per year, and only 5 maximum in 5 years. So that is being controlled on the McDougall side. So thank you for that question. I think that's a very important question, and it was one where we also wanted to make sure to deal with both sides. It is a lake that is shared by both municipalities.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that information. I wasn't aware that McDougall was in the process of updating their plan currently. So that, I think, is probably good news. Hopefully they can work with the same, we can work with the same principles as they will moving forward. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Any other, Councillor Lamb?
Yeah, thank you, Cecilia, for the presentation. Excuse me. I just wonder, is Mr. Jackson on the call?
He is.
John, could you comment on this? I mean, I'm not a scientist, and I don't know much about oxygen levels and calcium levels and that sort of thing. So can you comment on this?
I can't, through you, your worship, I can't really claim to have the scientific knowledge that would be able to assist in any of the information provided. I would simply rely on the scientists. So it would be something where I would turn to a qualified professional to respond. I just, when we do consider these kinds of applications, obviously we stay in our lanes, and the scientists say, oh, you can proceed with a development on a body of water that has some sensitivity issues or water quality issues if you do certain things. And so I'm completely reliant upon those kinds of scientists to come to those conclusions. So that's really where the policy exists in my in my world is what does the what does the science say? Thank you.
So I guess my question to John is, since we don't have a study, what is the science? Like, again, we can all, I don't know what Cecilia's background is, and I know she's passionate about what she told us, but what is the science? What are we dealing with?
The science
Wouldn't
is
that come out in a lake plan study?
the science.
That's what you're talking about, isn't it?
Mhm. That's right.
Yeah, so we don't have that. And that kind of is interesting to me. And again, as I think I've said to people sometimes in the debates or whatever, do you close lakes to development and then go find the science, or do you go find the science and then depending on the results, take action? And that's really what I guess we'll be debating in a bit.
I
Well,
think,
that's just a comment. The other comment is that some of these sufferances that are coming forward, these are people that own land, that have spent many thousands of dollars, at least the one on tonight and the last one, I think doing excellent environmental reports, detailed, and in our motions to approve any of these, if we do, they hedge on doing many of the things, if not all of the things, in the environmental reports. So, I know it's not just septic, but there are other guardrails around development now. And again, I'm not a scientist. I don't know where the tipping point is, whether it's people currently on the lake with perhaps, who have clear cutted and done a bunch of other things that are there affecting the lake versus, 1 or 2 or 5 more severances on the lake where they're environmentally told to do what they're going to do. And that's a condition of a severance. So, anyway, those are just comments. I guess no real question there. And John, could you comment on McDougall? What this thing about limiting 1 to 5? Is McDougall in the last weeks of this council looking at doing that in their official plan, as Cecilia said, if I understand that right? Is that true?
They're in the process of revising their official plan. And so they've prepared changes to a number of the policies. One of the proposed changes is, as Cecilia has described, to have 1 lot a year for a period of 5 years. So that that's sitting there as a draft change to the policy, but it's not been adopted as yet. And I suspect they're going to leave that to the new council.
Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, it's Gary Monahan, if I'm allowed to speak.
Yeah, I was going to ask Councillor Gorman Matthews if she wanted to comment first, but no, go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, just in regards to the science, as far as the 7 parts per million being below that and being described as a lake of capacity, that's a fact, from the Ministry of Resources. The parts per million of our lake that's measured by the ministry and by ourselves and with the Whitestone Conservation Association, that's a fact. That's science that we know. So we do know that Lorimer is a lake at capacity. We do know that our dissolved oxygen is lower. Where that tipping point is, I'll be honest, we don't know where that is, but that's the scary thing is it 1 away or is it 10 away? And the scary thing is once you go past that point, you can't go back. And that's our concern. So once a lake study is done, and they may come back and say, you can have 10 more places if they meet this and this and that, and we're good with that. But it's just a case of, we know how fragile the lake is, and we're close to it, and how close, we don't know. But, I'd rather err on the side of caution than not. And And just one last point, when you get the plans like for these severances, and Hutchison does a fantastic job on it, but you have to ask yourself, what task is Hutchison asked to do? And they're asked to, can a septic system go on here? Does it meet the Lakeshore Capacity Handbook? And they come back and yes, that. But if you ask the question, will this severance add other stressors to the lake, that they may give a different answer to you. Anyways, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay,
Mr.
thank
Mayor,
you.
I guess what Councillor Lamb, excuse me for my voice. The other observation I have is that when you look at the calcium levels and you look at the dissolved oxygen over, since 2000 onward, it's not degrading. It's either staying equal or getting better. So, it's not that it started at 7 and it's 6, 5, 4, 3. When I looked at the dissolved oxygen at 4.1 and 4.7, no, it's not the number 7, but it's sure a lot better than 213 where it was 3.4 and 3.11, right? It's improved. And the calcium levels, other than 219, they were increasing since 215. So, what do you say about that?
Yeah, well, the thing is, and this is actually a positive that it stayed the same, is that since all that time, our lake severances have been controlled. For 10 years, there was only one on the lake for including McDougall and Whitestone. And then we had a 5-year period where almost no severances went on. Now, this year, all of a sudden, we've had actually 4 severances done with 4 more proposed to be added on. So we've gone from either no severances or 1 severance, all of a sudden to a potential 8. So everything had stayed nice and good, the lake under control with controlled growth right at the moment. And the reason why this motion was put forward was because right now we have unlimited growth. And you see that we've gone from none and 1 to a potential of 8 in a year. Now, what will that 8 do? We know that going slowly with 0 and 1, the lake is under control. We don't know if going to 8, what will that do? Is that the tipping point? So that's my answer.
I won't tell you who, but a respected person that I know who's in this field told me that climate change has the vast majority effect in this area versus severances and lake development. That climate change is a very, very important part of all this. Which obviously we can't. I guess we could try to change, but that's playing a big role in this thing. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, and once again, that's the scary thing is without having any new severances, all the lakes in the area, including Lorimer, are going to be under greater stress because of climate change. We know that. So we're starting at this point here. We got climate change coming. That's going to be a big stressor. Now, do we add more stressors? So I agree with you. Climate change is, if it comes in here and raises because warmer waters hold less oxygen. So it will be a factor. So what we're saying is, yes, we know climate change is coming. Yes, it's going to be a big stressor. And then the next question is, do we want to add more stressors? That's the true question.
Okay, well, thank you. I guess we're going to get, we have some other planning items to deal with, and this one is going to come back and out of that discussion. So I'm wondering if we can move ahead. I have a few comments that I would probably make about this, but maybe I'll do it when we get to we've got 2 items that are relevant to this tonight. So Again, I want to thank our presenters, and we'll discuss what we do about it in a few minutes.
Thank you.
Could I get a motion? Sorry, before we do that, under matters arising from presentations and delegations. Could I get a mover and seconder, please, that the Council of Mist Valley Whitestone thank the Whitestone Agricultural Committee for their presentation, and that the draft animal bylaw be received for information. Councillor McEwen moves, seconded by Councillor Lamb. Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? Thank you, that's carried. And then item 4.2. Can I get a mover and seconder that the Council of Mist Valley Whitestone thanks Cecilia Parks and Gary Monahan for their presentation on Lorimer lake capacity, and that the presentation be received for information. Councillor Gorham Matthews, seconded by Councillor Lamb. Any discussion? All in favor? Okay, thank you. That's carried. And now a motion to move into committee of the whole, please. For the other planning matters. Councillor Lamb moves, seconded by Councillor McEwen. The committee moved into committee of the whole at its 7:36, let's say. All in favor? Thank you. Okay, so we have 4 items here. The first one is a consent application. B43/2022 Whitestone. The applicant is Skiba. And we have a report from Mr. Jackson on behalf of the planning board. This is a consent. So John, if you wouldn't mind, please, would you like to introduce this one?
This application is for a new lot on Lorimer Lake that came in with a report from a qualified environmentalist to support that would be able to be created with no adverse impact on the water quality of the lake. So it's now before council. It meets the requirements of the municipality's planning instruments in that regard. So it's a question of the whole issue of whether or not council wants to undertake any further studies to qualify the lake in any further way.
Okay, thank you. Anybody wishes to, does anyone wish to speak to this one? Councillor Gorham Matthews. Your hand up first.
Sure, thank you. So I just wanted to say that I find having these environmental reports so handy in terms of making these decisions on the waterfront properties. I think I said this last time, and I wish we had this every time. You know, it's a safety net for the lake, and it's a safety net for the people doing the development and their neighbors to follow these guidelines. And I think we feel confident that all measures are going to be undertaken to prevent any damage to the lake. Even during the construction phase, when I was reading this report, you know, there's going to be proper netting and things put up so that nothing goes into the lake. And the report even discussed shoreline, that, you know, a certain number of meters were going to be preserved for the shoreline so that stormwater and whatnot didn't run into the lake. And, you know, I just feel confident and, you know, wish, you know, maybe the new council can look at this, that this is our new protocol in terms of waterfront development, is that, you know, we follow this type of procedure to ensure that all the development on every lake, not just Lorimer Lake, is safe for the water.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Lamb.
Yeah, to Mr. Jackson. If we were to implement an interim control bylaw tonight, how would that affect this application?
It would depend upon how you structured the interim control bylaw in terms of what you wish to get caught in an interim control bylaw net, so to speak. That is, you could say that current applications for new lots would not be subject to the interim control bylaw, or you could say that all proposed new lots would be subject to being frozen. So it's the prerogative of the council and how they write their bylaw.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I wanted to make just a couple of comments. The first one has to do with the observation that Councillor Gorham Matthews made. I mean, I agree with her assertion that this would be a it would be very helpful for us if we had you know, if you like, mitigation measures on all waterfront development, and I wouldn't be surprised if eventually we get to that as a policy. It makes a lot of sense. I do, however, want to point out that it's not the fundamental concern is not the pollution by the septic system or the pollution of the lake by the septic system or by the construction. It's what happens when you have another piece of the shoreline actually occupied and human activity going on there. And keep in mind the focus of you know the control, all of the controls on things like septic systems, and all of the controls on shoreline alteration and all those other sorts of things. Even the site plan, if we were to put site plan control, for example, on a site like this or on a, you know, even those, they're all focused right up front. So when whatever is being built is being built. After that, we have no control over what happens. So the problem with septic systems, I mean, you can always design a septic system that's not going to pollute on day one. Question is, does it get maintained properly? And if it doesn't, then doesn't matter how well it's designed, it's going to pollute eventually. Human activity goes on. We don't have enforcement resources to go around and look at what people are doing to their shoreline. So and neither does the MNR or any other government agency. So what happens, of course, is that you know, the traffic back and forth over time, people just enjoying their properties and so on are displacing the habitat of other species that affect things. So I guess, you know, it is correct that we don't really have a good definition of capacity. If you read the reports of the planners and the environmental consultants, they don't like the LCAH because they think that there's more up-to-date things and different mitigation measures and so on. But keep in mind, that whole instrument, the capacity handbook, was there to deal with primarily with phosphorus in the water, which, you know, it's nobody's going to argue that isn't a very serious issue, but that's not the only issue. That's the M&R's. So the M&R's definition of capacity, which I would write with a capital C, because they kind of defined that at that time some years ago. And they did define it in terms of lake trout too, and lake trout are not the only things that we're concerned about either. So what we have is you know, a kind of a narrow definition of capacity. And what I would see a lake study doing is providing a somewhat wider definition of capacity. So how much development can a particular lake sustain, whether it has lake trout or not? How much can it sustain before you're starting to change the quality of the whole ecosystem, the quality of the experience that people have who use it as their recreation area and so on. And at some point in time, there even theoretically, at least, there will still be some perfectly good shoreline left that you could build something on. And you could build something that wouldn't pollute either. But you're going to degrade the quality of the experience for everybody else. You know, too many boats on the water, too many people swimming, fishing, whatever they're doing, to the point where now you don't want, the experience has been lost. So I think that's the kind of study that we would, that you would get into in order to resolve this issue. Only other thing I'm going to point out, and that has to do with the sort of trying to limit the number that you have. And this comment has already been made once tonight. There was, if you go back to the last version of Whitestone's official plan, the one before that had this limitation in it that said you can only have one severance per year, and it was supposed to be for 5 years because that was the lifespan of the official plan. And that was supposed to be a ramp off period so that the gate was going to be closed at the end of that. And as you heard at a previous meeting when we talked about this, a number of us around the table thought that the gate had in fact been closed. And now we've got, now it's, you know, as long as people, as long as applicants can demonstrate that or can claim that they're going to follow the provisions, the mitigation provisions in the LCAH, they're good to go. And there's no limit on any number. So we actually, instead of closing it down to bringing it to a conclusion, we started to throttle it. Instead of bringing it to a conclusion, we'd open it back up again even wider. And but even if you only allow one or two a year, or one or two every 5 years, you're going to end up with I mean, eventually you will get to the point where you still have a large number of new lots being created, and there is capacity on Larimer Lake based on the last time I took a look at the geography map for it. There's quite a bit of capacity that could be developed, it seems. So anyway, that's those are my comments. I have. Well, I'm gonna leave it at that. Councillor McEwen, did you have anything that you wanted to say about this?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think a question of Mr. Jackson. Presently, 90 meters is all that's required as a frontage, and under our current process, 3 lots severable remaining or retaining the balance. That's the category things are falling in currently. And McDougall, they followed that same process just a month ago in severing a property on their side of, or their end of the lake. What, do you have any suggestions on moving forward to move from the process of 3+1 to say 1+1, 150-foot fronts? Do you have any comments on that? I know we're getting into bylaw issues and interpretations of the OP and going back on old reports from ministries and all kinds of things here. Do you have any comments on where we can move forward in a gentle way here? Because we have requests for severances and we have requests to drop the number allowable for severances.
I think you have to put it in the context of a policy review to treat it in a way that has a proper planning rationale, whether it includes science, but also other social parameters, other biophysical parameters. So I think you can't really just say an easy fix is change the numbers without really going through the exercise of doing an assessment. I don't know if that helps or not, but I just think that being arbitrary, it can actually work against the advancement of a new policy regime that the community is interested in.
And I guess that pretty much says it. I guess as a counselor or as council, we're dealing with people's properties that they've paid taxes on for a very long time. And if the science at some point protects the lake, I just hope we're not getting past the tipping point, but we haven't so far. As Councillor Lam pointed out, numbers haven't changed appreciably on some of the factors in the very recent number of years. In fact, in some ways, in some cases, they're a little bit better. So I guess we'll have to try to get this into a process sooner than later to look at a review of the bylaws and the OP. Thank you.
So I should have asked the applicants are not here or on the call. Is that correct? Okay. Is there anybody else who wants to speak to this one? We're just going to go through them in our committee of the whole, because we don't have motions on the floor yet. Councillor Lamb.
Yeah, I just, John, in your report, I guess, that comes from page 5, page 35, page 17. Like, it weighs on my mind, another scientist, you said earlier, people did, does an environmental report, and the report explains the background to the matter of nutrient inputs associated with new development. It has become clear that earlier correlation between development and water quality degradation was false. This falsehood was qualified to the heavily mineralized soils despite the city found in Canadian field. These measures have been difficult for many to understand or accept. There continues to be a notion that the best time is to restrict future development. There is no longer any science to base such a policy framework. And you wrote it, and that weighs heavily on my mind. And again, don't get me wrong. We have to do a lake plan study for what, like, fully for that, fully for practical to get that done. This council over spending, but you're recommending this. And I mean, what say you about that? That's pretty clear.
I had a little trouble hearing. I think I get the general sort of question that if the science now has been updated to understand that the capacity model, which is primarily based on a phosphorus loading phenomena, to confirm that you will not create any adverse impacts. If that is in fact the parameter, which I understand it is after being in this business for almost 45 years, then the science isn't going to, I don't believe, stand in the way. So it has to be things like, I call them biophysical features. What are the constraints for development, whether they be wetlands or fish habitat or other such features. So I can only rely on the parameters that we have in front of us. Ergo, I have no reason at this juncture, based on our existing policy regime, to think that there's a strong rationale to deny it. And I'm sure if that helps. I had trouble hearing your discussion there, Councilor Ma'am. Sorry.
Okay.
I think that answers it.
Okay.
Okay, so if there are no other comments on this one, we will be coming back to it once we come out of committee of the whole. But the next one is another consent application from Sheila Stiles, and this is for property in Whitestone on Highway 124. So once again, John, if you want to.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. This one is an application to create one rural lot on Highway 520. They've actually been waiting months for comments from MTO, and MTO has given them the green light for an entrance for a new rural lot as well as the retained. So there really are no outstanding issues in my understanding of the application. Thank you.
Okay, are there any questions or comments from council about this one? Anybody else? All right. Thank you. Next one is a consent application to do a lot addition, I guess, to property owned by Mr. Jack Black. And this is right across the lake here.
Yes, and
On.
it's a very straightforward application. Mr. Jack Black, I love that name, by the way, is simply to increase what I would call a very small lot and give it a little more space from the neighbor who has a large acreage behind him. I see no planning concerns with respect to this application. It's just going to improve an existing situation.
And it sounds like he's already parking on it anyways. Is that the case?
Or he's certainly crossing it, yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, I will ask again if there are any comments or questions on this one. It sounds like there aren't. Okay, so that brings us to item 5.4, which was, the title says a proposed official plan amendment. But this is the item that we started to talk about at a previous meeting and ran out of time. And so we didn't deal with it. If you look at the original proposal that I put forward as a proposal, it was to make an interim modification to the official plan to remove this reference to the Lake Capacity Assessment Handbook, which, as you've already heard several times tonight, is considered problematic by many people. But not just me, but in any case, that after some discussion with Mr. Jackson, we came to the conclusion that if we were going to do something on an interim basis to try to stop new lot creation on Lorimer Lake until the completion of a study, then the thing to do that would be to use a mechanism that is in Section 38 of the Planning Act, which involves an interim control, what's called an interim control order, and that involves passing a bylaw, and that says until we finish, essentially in a nutshell, it says until we finish the study that we're going to do, which by the way is supposed to be done in a year, hopefully, and if not 2 years as a maximum, but until we do a study to address a particular matter that's been raised, which is this whole question about whether or not the lake is at capacity for development, what that really means, then essentially new lot creation would be, the proposal here is that new lot creation would be frozen. So it would not take place. That wouldn't stop people who already have building permits or property that they could build on from building on it, but it would stop new lot creation. So on the assumption that that's what we would put in the order, that it is to address new lot creation. So that's, and I don't know, maybe we've had our discussion about this already. I think the proposal that you'll see when we get out of committee of the whole into the actual the matters arising from the planning items is that we ask staff to draft such a bylaw and bring it back to the next meeting of council. So I guess the acid test here for tonight at least will be when we get to that bylaw, to determine whether or not council has the appetite to do something on an interim basis to restrict development on Lorimer Lake. And that until the completion of a study. So that is that's really what this is about. And I think the concern simply is that as I mentioned earlier, there seems to be a fair bit of property that folks could choose to subdivide or create new lots on by whatever mechanism. And they could very likely do what the recent applicants that we've received, including the first one tonight, have done, which is go and get environmental reports that say, oh, well, you can address this concern about phosphorus in the water with these mitigation measures, and you're good to go. So we would have, I guess, no grounds to reject them unless we had this interim control order. So anyway, that's what this is about. I don't know if there are any other questions. If you want to have a round of questions or comments at this stage, or you want to wait, we'll test it in a minute.
Yeah.
Councilor Lamb.
Again, I just hold on. I'll take a swig of water here. Are we best to talk about this now or when we come out and you're testing the bylaw? Because, I'll comment on it now. John, you and I, when this first came up a couple of weeks ago, had a conversation. I called you on this and just to find out a little bit more about interim control bylaws. and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm going to paraphrase sort of our discussion that day. I ask you that if we were to pass this, and order, you'd have to have a lake plan study. And you told me that based on your experience, a lake plan study would cost somewhere in the area of $40,000. You then said that you had been involved in 12 interim control bylaws during your lifetime, and that you had won all 12 of those interim control bylaw hearings at the Ontario Land Tribunal. And I ask you, well, what would the cost of going to the Ontario Land Tribunal be? Well, first of all, were all 12 of them appealed? And you said all 12 were. And certainly if you have land on Lorimer, I would suspect that someone's going to question this. And like your other 12, we'll have an appeal on this. And I ask you what the cost of that would be. And you indicated usually a 3-day hearing at a cost of about $25,000 a day. So when you added it up, it was 75,000 plus 40. So you were looking at $115,000 or so, but certainly north of $100,000. And regardless of what we feel on closing the lake, and I hear what the people are saying, and again, there's no science at this point. I kind of believe you get the science and make the decision versus make the decision and then go get the science. But I'm concerned, and would put the question to the clerk again, that if we're looking at a potential decision that's 100,000 plus conservatively, and correct me if I'm wrong, John, if my figures are wrong, we're in lame duck. We cannot pass to the next council a decision that potentially could cost us $100,000 or $125,000. If that doesn't qualify for lame duck, I don't know what in God's name does. So I don't think we can do this, even if we wanted to. So that's, I guess, my feeling on it. And again, I think, maybe we can, if the study is 40,000, that's under 50,000. Maybe we could order an immediate start to a lake plan study for Lorimer Lake and get a 2-month jump on that, because that's within the 50,000 or whatever that we can spend. And I would entertain something like that, but just going full bore and saying, stop it, away we go, I can't support and won't support. So, and hopefully my rationale is not, is correct. So, does the clerk have anything to say on this? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I don't, other than that's a good point. And as always, I need to get some legal advice, because these can be prickly situations and you don't always know until you look at it very closely.
Mr. Jackson, is anything that I said incorrect?
I think you captured the numbers that I would provide as my best guess estimate. And I think they're valid numbers based on those 12 different experiences that I've been involved with over the years.
Thank you.
Councillor McEwen.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I think the timing is inappropriate really for this council, with only a couple of meetings left heading into the next term, to be making any kinds of decisions on this. There are people out there with properties and they spent a lot of money, they've done a lot of work, and it just hasn't just happened in the last couple of weeks, the last month. It takes a long time and a lot of effort to go for environmental studies and some of the work they've done to get to this point. I think we're fortunate that we're hearing the terms environmental studies and reports from professionals at long last and as being part of the resolutions for these consent applications, I think it's really going to be a good thing moving forward. Especially with reference to the septics. I haven't been a proponent from the beginning of the 300-meter distance back from a shore. I felt all along that there has to be some way to work around that without interfering with the quality of the lake, such as the septic issues as are presented today by the new reporting, new types of beds and systems. With the issues coming at us now with site plans, requirement for site plans for folks who are looking at development, especially on these sensitive lakes, I think it's very significant. And as was mentioned to me just recently by a ratepayer, they're more concerned about climate control, the number of severe types of storms that we're going to get in the next few years, maybe indefinitely. That's a really big factor. So the runoff into lakes, it's a really big issue. The degradation, the cutting down of everything to the shores and manicuring to the shores, that's an area I hope council can look at in the near future and put some teeth into. I know it's an issue in my opinion on Whitestone Lake, let alone these more sensitive lakes. So I think I can only support moving forward and leaving it in the good hands of the next council after the election. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gore Matthews.
Thank you, Mayor Comrie. So I just wanted to kind of comment on a meeting that we had last week with the Environmental Stewardship Committee. We're actually moving in this direction and we'll be bringing this forward, not myself, but the committee to the new council in terms of lake planning and water quality testing. Really, to summarize what we learned last week during our meeting, we need these type of plans for our lake. They need to be done by the municipality. We need to be the owner of the plan. We need to be the owner of our water quality data testing as well. We can't rely on citizen science data when it comes time to appeals and being taken to court. We need to be doing this work ourselves, and it's not going to be cheap, but we need to start planning for that. And I would certainly support putting into motion a lake study plan for Lorimer Lake and for some of the other lakes in the future as well.
Okay, thank you. All right. Are any other comments about this one? Scott, go ahead. Yes, please. Otherwise, people can't hear you.
Hello, it's Scott Mack speaking. I just have one really.
Scott, excuse me, I don't think that's mic is maybe turned on at the back. No.
Red
Here.
button on the back.
You don't, yeah. Did it come on? Just a minute. Whoops. Yeah, it's okay. Well, you're good to go.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I just had one quick question for John Jackson, and it really comes down to for a lake study to do with oxygen levels and stuff. I know testing for that is mid-August to mid-September. How long would you best guess it would take to put a study together? A couple years of data would you need? I would assume. So I'm just wondering how long, John, you would assume it might take an environmental company to put together an entire report.
Through you, Your Worship, the reality of the professional world and trades world is that you are in the land of double. I would have said pre-COVID, you could have got it done in a year. I think you're going to need to double that. So I think if Mr. Nash is kind of alluding to the fact that you'd be multi-years, I think you're going to need that second year to accomplish this task.
Okay, thank you. And from what I understand, an interim bylaw is only in effect for 1 year, and then it can be appealed. Am I correct on that?
Yes, but it can be renewed for a second year. So in reality, it has a full 2-year program available to council.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, further to the question that was just raised, I think everybody sort of has to understand that the lake plans are part of a bigger process. Okay, so you can do a lake study, and some lakes have done their own lake studies or have done a lot of work on the lake study. That's not to say that, you know, because there's a lot of data that you have to collect. And we're fortunate in some ways in that we do have people who are out there doing actual lake monitoring and that kind of thing. So there is, because that's the thing that obviously takes some time and so on. But still, it is an expensive process, and it's a time-consuming process. But let's suppose you do a lake study and you decide, okay, out of that comes some recommendations, like you should increase the minimum frontage or the minimum lot size, or, you know, there should be other things that influence the suitability for development and so on. How do those things become actualized? How do they become law? Well, they have to get put into the official plan. So, and we're not likely going to do them piecemeal, you know, to just do an official plan for this lake and do that, you know, because we could do that now if we wanted, right? The thing is, they're going to get put together, and then the whole thing goes for review to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. And that in itself could take a year. So we could be looking at 3 years of the new council sitting here with applications for subdivision, for new lot creation, et cetera, on Lorimer Lake, and they all go through according to the existing official plan, which you've seen the reference. It says new lot creation may only be considered in accordance with the LCAH, right? So, so if you can get an environmental consultant to write a report that says, oh yeah, it's possible for you to conform to the LCAH on this site, then you're good to go. And that's the situation we're in right now. So just so everybody's clear, that's, I mean, if I thought this whole thing would go away and it would get resolved in a year, I wouldn't have suggested an interim control order. Anyway, if there's nothing further, I guess we will come out, we'll entertain a motion to come out of committee of the whole. Moved by Councillor Gorham Matthews. Seconded by Councillor McEwen. That the meeting reconvened to a regular meeting at, looks like about 8:40 p.m. All those in favor? Thank you. That's carried. So here we have item number 5.1. This is under matters arising from committee of the whole. And I'll read you a motion and see if we can get a mover and seconder. Whereas John Jackson Planner has Prepared a report for the Perry Sound Area Planning Board regarding consent application B 43/2022W. The applicant's name is Skiba, and provided a copy to the municipality of Whitestone. Now therefore be it resolved that the council of the municipality of Whitestone receives this report as information, and that the council of the municipality of Whitestone recommends this consent application for approval in principle, subject to the following conditions. 1, that payment of a parkland dedication fee be made in accordance with the current municipal fees and charges bylaw. 2, that the new lots receive 911 addressing from the municipality. 3, that the applicants enter into a section 5126 consent agreement with the municipality of Whitestone to be registered on title to include. And there are 3 things under this. The first one, the implementation of the mitigation measures set out in the Hutchinson Environmental Sciences Report dated August 31st, 2022. Second, the implementation of the septic system design measures set out in the Hutchinson Environmental Sciences Report dated August 31st, 2022 to ensure the retention of phosphorus. And 3, recognition of the private access road for the new lots and to indemnify the municipality for any responsibility or liability for the access or maintenance. And then the 4th condition was that payment of all applicable planning fees be made to the municipality of Whitestone. So I realize that's quite a mouthful, but would someone like to move it? Councillor Gorman Matthews moves. Is there a seconder? Okay, Councillor McEwen seconds. Discussion. Well, I have a suggestion. Maybe this is an amendment. I don't know that we might add a 4th point to item 3. This is the things that are. Well, actually, it doesn't need to be under the. It doesn't really need to be in the 5126. I don't think. I'll let Mr. Jackson comment. So it's probably just a 5th condition, which is that development be subject to site plan control. I know that was mentioned earlier, but it was not. It isn't in the motion. Site plan control should be a separate item, not part of the 5126. Am I right, John? We're going to do it.
That's true. It is actually available to the municipality on any property. So it's already in place. You just have to choose to turn on the site plan control requirement switch. So it's effectively in place now.
Yeah, I realize that, but it's not an administrative decision to turn it on, right? Do we not need to let people know that we intend to do it or are likely to do it?
It can be if you feel that you need to state what I'll call the obvious, you can put it in. It doesn't harm anything. The 5126 is probably as much an important site plan tool as the actual site plan agreement itself, because it's setting out how things are to be located, where they're to be located, and what measures are needed to mitigate. So it's got a bit of duplication, but no harm, no foul.
Well, okay. I'll ask the movers and seconders if you have any comments on that, if you have any opinion about this. Is it something you want to add or not?
I'm fine with adding it. It just, gives you an extra level of control and reinforces that those measures are going to be taken to protect the site.
All right, so
I'll go with that also, Mr. Mayor. I think if it's visible, more transparent, it won't
that,
hurt. Thank you.
okay, so what I would do is I would add an item 5 then, that says that development of the new lots be subject to site plan control. You're okay with that, mover and second? Okay, is there any more discussion about this? I'll ask our CIO clerk to call the question then, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor
record.
Gorham Matthews,
Yes,
Councillor McEwen,
Yes.
Councillor Lamb,
Yes,
Mayor Comrie,
Yes,
that motion is carried.
okay, thank you. That. Forgot a check mark. Brings us to 5.2. And I'll read the suggested motion. Whereas John Jackson Planner Inc. has prepared a report for the Parry Sound Area Planning Board regarding consent application B50/2022 W. The applicant is Stiles and provided a copy to the municipality of Whitestone. Now therefore be it resolved that the council of the municipality of Whitestone receives this report as information and that the council of the municipality of Whitestone recommends this consent application for approval in principle, subject to the following conditions. Number 1, that payment of a parkland dedication fee be made in accordance with the current municipal fees and charges by law. 2, that the new lot receive 911 addressing from the municipality. 3, that a clearance letter be obtained from the Ministry of Transportation with regard to approval for a driveway. And 4, that payment of all applicable planning fees be made to the municipality of Whitestone. Someone move that. Councillor Lamb moves, seconded by Councillor McEwen. Any discussion on this one? No? Okay, once again, if there's no further discussion, can we have a recorded vote, please?
Councillor Gorham Matthews,
yes,
Councillor McEwen,
Yes.
Councillor Lamb,
yes,
Mayor Comrie,
Yes.
that motion is carried.
Thank you. 5.3. Whereas John Jackson Planner Inc. has prepared a report for the Parry Sound Area Planning Board regarding consent application B48/20 or -2022 Whitestone. Applicant is Black and provided a copy to the municipality of Whitestone. Now therefore be it resolved that the council of the municipality of Whitestone receives this report as information and that the council of the municipality of Whitestone recommends the consent application for approval in principle, subject to the following conditions. 1, that the applicant's solicitor confirms in writing that the transferred lands merge in title with the benefiting lands. And 2, that payment of all applicable planning fees be made to the municipality of Whitestone. Mover and seconder. Councillor McEwen. Councillor Lamb, seconds. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. Can we call the roll? Please, Madam Clerk.
Counselor Gore Matthews,
Yes.
Counselor McEwen,
Yes.
Counselor Lamb,
Yes.
Mayor Comrie,
Yes.
that motion is carried.
All right, thank you. Okay, the proposed item 5.4, the motion regarding the interim control order. That the council of the Municipality of Whitestone does hereby receive the report proposed official plan amendment number 3 prepared by Mayor Comrie dated September 20th, 2022 for information. And that the council of the Municipality of Whitestone does hereby direct staff and the municipal planning consultant to prepare an interim control bylaw per section 38 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, for the purpose of limiting new lot creation on Lorimer Lake. Is there a mover and seconder? All right, hearing none, I will, but not moved. All right. Okay. That brings us to item 7 on the agenda, which is the consent agenda. Tonight consisting of meeting minutes for the special council meeting of Monday, September 19th, 2022. And regular council meeting minutes for Tuesday, September 20th, 2022. The one on the 19th was a closed meeting. We had a closed meeting agenda. And there's also unfinished business, which is listed on pages 4 to 9 of the agenda. Could I get a mover and seconder, please? Sorry, for the following. Whereas the council of the Municipality of Whitestone has reviewed the consent agenda consisting of the 2 meeting minutes and the unfinished business. Now therefore be it resolved that the council of the Municipality of Whitestone does hereby approve the special council meeting minutes of September 19th, 2022, and the regular council meeting minutes of September 20th, 2022, and receives for information all other items contained in the consent agenda dated October 4th, 2022. Councillor Gore Matthews moves, seconded by Councillor Lamb. Any discussion? Okay, if not, all in favor of approving the consent agenda? Sorry, Councillor Lamb, were you looking for? No, you're okay? All right, thanks. I just thought maybe you were looking for an item to ask about. So, no matters then arising from the consent agenda. Accounts payable. That the council of the Municipality of Whitestone received for information the accounts payable listing in the amount of $365,090.56 for the period ending September 30th, 2022. Who would like to move that? Councillor Lamb moves, seconded by Councillor Matthews. Any discussion on any of those items? All in favor? Indicate. Thank you, that's carried. That brings us to number 10 on the agenda, which is bylaws. And we have a bylaw to appoint an interim integrity commissioner. So could I get a mover and seconder, please, that bylaw 52-2022, being a bylaw to appoint interim integrity commissioner services, be read a first and second time this 4th day of October 2022, and further read a third time, passed and properly signed and sealed this 4th day of October 2022, and numbered bylaw 52-2022. That's moved by Councillor Gorham Matthews, seconded by Councillor McEwen. Any discussion? All those in favor? Thank you, that's carried. So next we have correspondence. There is a list which consists of items A through I. 9 items. Are there? Well, let's get the motion. Whereas the Council of the Municipality of Whitestone has reviewed the correspondence items listed on page 10 of the October 4th, 2022 Council agenda. Now therefore be it resolved that Council received the correspondence items for information with the following extracted for further discussion and action. We'll get the list in a sec. Is there a mover and seconder, please, for that? I see Councillor McEwen moves, seconded by Councillor Gorham Matthews. Which of those items, if any, would you like to go for discussion? Councillor Lamb. All right.
I'm trying to get the right number, G.
All right, G, that was the Farley's Road, parking it into Farley's Road, okay. G, I'm just gonna make a note of these, so. The end of Farley's Road. And item A was the Perry Sound letter, yeah, Perry Sound letter four laning, okay. Anybody want item B? No?
What was the question, Mr. Mayor? Sorry.
The item B is the letter to the Minister of Education regarding the Perry Sound Mega School. I guess, you know what, I want to mention it since it's come up, so Perry Sound letter Mega School.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to have a comment on I.
On Church Agricultural Society, okay. All right. Any others? We got 4 so far. All right, let's, with those 4 items, then can we agree that that's the motion? Everybody agreed? Hearing no objections, I'm going to say it's carried. So, item A, the 4 laning.
Yeah, quite simple. I agree with it. I think it's long overdue and I think we should support the Perry Sound motion to complete the 4 laning between Perry Sound and Sudbury. So, can just make a quick motion to support their motion or there's a number of accidents, you hear all the time on the radio north of Perry Sound between here and Sudbury, particularly in the wintertime. And, the days of traveling a 2-lane highway, that's a provincial highway is getting less and less. So I think we should support them.
Okay, will we do a sport? When I
do it now, we can do next meeting.
Yeah, do it the next meeting. That's fine. They're not gonna complete it in the next 2 weeks.
all right, okay, so, but we're going to agree. I have no problem agreeing to support it, okay. So I'll just put resolution for next meeting. Okay, so item B, which was the one immediately following that one, was also a letter from and a resolution from the town of Perry Sound to Minister Lecce. And the concern here, which has been around for a while now, is that the size of the school was, and it's in the process of being renovated, and the original plan, as you probably know, was to have it be a K-12 school essentially. So they were going to close McDougall and Nobel elementary schools, and everybody was going to be in this new building. And it looks like the enrollments have, the enrollment projections on which that plan was based have changed substantially, and it looks like there's no way that they're going to be able to close those schools. But there's also a concern about the amount of money on a per capita basis that the Ministry of Education had agreed to provide in terms of capital, which was not consistent with today's costs or today's numbers. So the reason that I wanted to draw this to your attention is that I keep getting asked by the other municipalities in West Perry Sound, and they're pretty much all concerned about this. I think I keep getting asked if Whitestone will sign a letter of support or send a letter of support for this resolution. So I'd like to get some. If it were up to me, I would. Let me just say that. But Councillor Gorman Matthews.
Thank you, Mayor Comrie. I think it was last summer that I brought this up to council. I had attended a meeting, it was Zoom with the engineers, and they had outlined their plans for this school. And it was evident even midway through COVID that there wasn't enough space for all of the students in this school. They were giving cute names to what would be portables. They're calling them pods to make them sound more exciting, to stuff your children in a pod instead of a portable. But the kids, they already knew before they were going to start building that there wouldn't be enough room for all the students in this school. I think this ARC review was done back in 2014. A lot has changed in that time, including the amount of money that was allocated to this project. I think it was 4 or 5 years ago that they assigned this money. And I think we can all agree that I can't remember how much it was, but however much it was, X number of dollars doesn't go as far now as it did 5 years ago. So I think that's the reason that they're starting to look at these pods and things and scaling back the school. Whereas they need to be looking in the other direction of making the school bigger from the get-go. So I would completely support you signing and, our high school students go to that school, they need, proper space, they need proper trade space for trades and science labs and library, and we don't want to cut corners on that.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? So let me ask you, would you support us sending a letter of support simply to have this relooked at? I see nods. Okay, so that's we have actually in effect done the same thing before, and because it did, as Councilor Gorham Matthews mentioned, it did come up once before, and a number of us very sound heads of council did actually meet with Minister Lecce. Well, I wasn't there, but some of them did, and they conveyed the message that we were pretty much all in support of revisiting this. It just hasn't happened for whatever reason. Item G, parking at the end of Farley's Road. Is a request for some people to use that parking lot, I believe, correct?
Yeah, thank you. I had some conversation, well, I got this email that I think is in here earlier this week, as did Councillor Woods, who lives on Farley's Road. And I spoke to Brian and Yannick a couple days ago, so hopefully I've got this right. But some time ago, and again, I didn't realize all these things at the end of Farley's Road, the parking lot down there. I guess over the last month or so, when we've been looking at boat launches, I've learned more and more about it. But there are 12 lots down there that have deeded access to this parking area and boat launch, although there's no dock down there. And they're water access lots on Whitestone. There's also another group of people who live, I think, primarily down the Long Arm Bay on Whitestone, who are water access, who use the marina, many of them or some of them, and dock their boats and cars there, and then go over to their cottages mostly throughout the year. Of course, the marina shuts down in November, and they were simply wanting to be able to park at the end of this parking area, particularly this fall and winter, so that they could then take a snowmobile and access, or snowshoe or whatever, over to their cottage. It seemed sort of reasonable to me, but when we looked into it, I guess what's happened is the 12 lots for $50 a year pay us and get a parking spot. And along the way, we've granted each of them 4 more. So there's 60 spots over there for 12 people and their families. And I'm told that rarely is there any more than 6 or 7 or 8 cars parked there at any one time. At one point, some of these other people were getting parking passes for that area. And then it was discovered that I guess it was in error. So they took away the parking from them. 1 or 2 of them did park this summer over there, even though there's only 7 in a parking lot of 60, and they got ticketed or told, we're going to tow you away. So it just doesn't, it hits me that you get 5 parking spots for $115 a year. Seems like a ridiculous amount. That's what you'd pay in one day in parking in Toronto. But I don't think we need to give 5 parking spots for people. And again, so I think the immediate thing would be to not, if they use this, and again, they're only talking 1 or 2 or 3 people, to not, turn a blind eye and don't ticket them when they do use it. But according to the memo from the clerk, and I appreciate it, I guess she says that we would have to check legally whether that parking lot, if it's the intended exclusive use of these 12 deeded lots. I would find that hard to believe, but maybe it is. So I would ask, I guess, that we get a quick legal opinion on that. And if if it's exclusively, then I guess the new council will have to look what they're going to do with the launch, right? Anyway, my guess is that as long as they have access, that would be the rule of the day. And then we could allow these other people to use it. But in the interim, I don't think we should be going down Farley's. I guess there's an ATV track that they can take from this launch through the bush and actually get to Long Arm Bay, but they have nowhere where to park, right, to get to their place. So that's basically the issue. And I think we should get a legal opinion, and I think we should try to accommodate other lake or water access places on Whitestone Lake. And there's only a few of them that would need this. Thank you. Hopefully, I don't know whether the people are on the call or not, if I've explained that correctly, or oh.
Are you the folks who wrote the letter? No?
Actually, my name is Boris, and I am the neighbor of Yannick and Brian. Actually, Yannick wrote the letter. And thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and the respected members of the council for taking this. And all we're really asking is to be able to kind of get a reliable and a safe access to our property during a time of winter, meaning from end of the October to end of the April, essentially. When we don't have actual water access to our property, then we can use it from marina.
Okay, thank you. I go ahead.
Who is
My
it?
name is Tom, Chris Vernon.
You want to go to the mic, Tom?
Yes, please.
Yeah, hello.
You just turn the red button. I think it's, yeah.
It's on now? Okay. My name is Tom Vernon, my wife Chris. Yes, we do have a property on Long Arm. We're the last ones going up the lake on Long Arm. And it is only a water access point. We've been there, well, my dad bought it in '64, so I've been there since that point in time. Basically, the 309 is the parking lot for those 12 properties that are on Lost Bay, because they also have water access only. So basically what it boils down to is you've given exclusive parking to those 12 people, and nobody else is allowed to park there. Not the half dozen properties that are on Long Arm, but anybody else in the municipality cannot park there. You cannot buy a ticket. I've asked to buy a permit and been denied. So, you know, if it ever came down to actually getting a ticket, so far we've just got warnings. But if it ever came down to actually getting a ticket, then I would fight it and take it to some court. And given the fact that I've been refused permission to purchase a permit, I doubt that an adjudicator would look very kindly at that. It seems like you've spent a lot of money and effort, and you're still improving the parking lot there for 12 ratepayers. There's a lot more than just 12 ratepayers that are concerned. Like we use one of the ratepayers over there is a friend of ours, and they've given us a permit to park there. So yeah, we park there because they're allowed four permits or something like this, so they gave me a permit. But I would prefer to buy one outright. And your 12 people, they're under that Schedule A in the bylaw. I don't see why you can't create a Schedule B, C, D, E, the whole alphabet for other purposes. Additional parking for such persons as us, trailer parking, business people that may want to use that as a staging area to conduct their business. If they're doing septic tanks or something like that, they can go off of there, you can charge them for parking. Like I say, I can't see of any reason why you don't issue permits, other than, as you said in your response to Yannick, is that at the point in time when you came in ownership of the property, those people had the right of access to the property. And so you gave them the right to issue permits. But in that, even though they have the right of access, doesn't mean they have the right to park. And therefore you're charging them for parking. If they had the right to park there, you couldn't charge them for parking.
Okay, thanks. This is not the forum for us to get into that.
I see.
kind of
Well,
thing.
you did say that you would have your staff look into the matter. And I would appreciate it that if staff would look into the matter, and if it's, you have to get involved with legal, then get involved with the legal opinion of if or when you could additionally charge for parking. And if you can't charge, if you're not willing to let other people park there, then I don't see why the town should be spending any more money for 12 ratepayers. That's all.
Okay, thank you for your, do you want to put the mic, just put it back there. It's okay. Thanks. I noticed that someone had said, well, they used it in the wintertime. We don't plow it in the wintertime, right?
Yes, you do.
Yes,
We
you do.
Yeah.
It's very well maintained.
Very well, very well.
Well, that's interesting. I didn't think that would be happening. So, but yeah,
When we come up for skidooing, we
Yeah.
park there,
yeah.
and I think there's only 2 of those 12 that actually.
Yeah. Okay, well,
Mr. Mayor, I have a comment on
oh,
that.
all right, go ahead.
Being a nearly 50-year resident here, and I used that parking lot before the township owned it, because I had a friend over on the Long Arm, and it was only to visit him at that time. But after that point, I used it occasionally until finally I was getting ticketed, only one in the parking lot in the shoulder seasons. But I was getting not ticketed, but notices is what I received. Never did get ticketed, thank goodness. But it's come up from a lot of people in that general area, especially in Farley's Road. Why the heck can't we go in and access the lake there and at least use it for a couple hours, pick up a permit to use it for a day pass type thing? And I never really pursued it myself, although I used to go fishing off there, ice fishing with a neighbor of mine. We'd park and go until finally we were terrorized by the bylaw enforcement. So we just said, well, not worth it. I did inquire back in the days about permit and it wasn't available. I think I'm going back far enough though before the township had acquired that as property, or it was transferred to the township. So
Prior, when it was privately owned, I parked there, and somebody, one of those 12 asked me, well, how come you're parking here? I said, well, as far as I know, you have the right to park here, but that doesn't give you the exclusive right to refuse other people to park.
Yeah.
Only the owner can do that.
I often wondered why there couldn't be like a use permit of some kind issued to folks as a resident, because it's municipally owned property
Right.
or some such thing.
Yeah.
Maybe it's something that should be readdressed.
But I think we need, the quick
Yeah.
legal opinion on it. And I think if it's not exclusive use, that it's fairly simply, give them the ability to go in there this winter anyway, until we can come to a more permanent solution.
The owner has the right to use the property as they see fit, whether it's the municipality or a private individual.
Yeah, I realize, that, but yeah,
No,
Yeah, this isn't a debate time. It's,
No,
I brought
no.
it up and we'll take care of it. Don't worry.
Yeah, I also, I think it isn't so much a question of legal opinion, it's a question of, I think our staff would have to look at how many people there are that are likely to use it and that kind of thing. And that was an action item that we had, if you look back at some other things, that there was some discussion about determining how many people on Whitestone Lake, particularly on the North Basin were water access and needed a place to park, and where were they parking and all of that kind of thing. So we would know whether, like, if we just opened it up and said, okay, fine, anybody who wants can buy a permit, would there be enough parking space there for the people that use it, which is something that comes up every time you have a public access point.
There's very few people that can park there.
Yeah.
Busiest time would probably be 3 to 4.
Yeah.
And it's still not full.
Well, anyway, we will get a report as the
Thank you.
everybody's in agreement that that's what should happen. Everybody on council,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So we'll ask the staff to. And that brings us to item I, Dunchurch Agricultural Society, Councillor McEwen.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Just a note of thanks as a director of Agricultural Society, that we're very appreciative of council support during the fall fair time, leading up to and during, and the little monetary gift that's received from council also is appreciated. This past fair was, I guess, a record fair in the history of our Dunchurch Fall Fair, I believe, and the numbers of people. Because people were just getting very anxious to get out and do some socializing after 2 years of COVID, and we hadn't had a fall fair for 3 years running, I guess. So anyway, just a voice of thanks and top of the letter. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Item 12, councillor items. Are there any items that you wish to bring? Okay, I don't hear any. Are there any questions from the public? Scott, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had 2 quick questions. I guess the first question was, I noticed the roadway outside the community center here and the LCBO isn't paved as of yet. And I was wondering, has that been tendered to be paved? Because I know the optimum temperature to pave is when it's 70 degrees or higher. So I'm just wondering, I guess, what the timeline is on paving it, and I haven't seen a tender come in for it yet. That was my first question. Then the second one is, I know you guys passed a bylaw for a new integrity commissioner, and I was just wondering why the public wasn't advised that the integrity commissioner would be changing from Harold Elston to Aird Burles LLP. I was just wondering why that was never brought up and kind of just pushed through. That's all. Thank you very much.
Okay, you want to answer the first question, CAO?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, there's a tender out for paving, and council will see that recommended award on October 18th.
Okay, so the second question was about the transition of the integrity commissioner. What happened basically is that the integrity commissioner that we had resigned and decided that he did not wish to fill out the balance of his term, which goes till, or which went to, I'm going to say April or something like that of 2023, going back to when he was appointed. And he recommended another person to act in his place for essentially for the balance of his term. And matters like that, of course, are determined by council. They're not. I mean, we don't. I don't think when we retained the original one, we did it in an open session either. But in any case, the council accepted that recommendation on an interim basis. Our intention is to go to tender. Well, not go to tender, but to solicit proposals from a few individuals who do this and see. So this individual that's his name is John Mascaron, and he will be working with us for the time being. We have to have an integrity commissioner all the time, understand? There's no hiatus there, but anyway, the procurement for those services, I do not believe would be done in a public meeting in any case. So, I mean, you would know when there is a new integrity commissioner. And I actually thought that we had given a notice to people that there was a different. We did not give that notice, I guess. Is that correct? No, we didn't put it on the website or anything.
I'd have to check and see if outside of the closed session, there was direction to stop or whether it was in closed.
Yeah. Anyway, that's. I don't think there's any problem about letting people know who it is, right? It's just, but we don't normally ask the public to choose the integrity commissioner. It's not, it's kind of legal services. Understand these are people that the counselors can seek advice from and so on about their legal responsibilities and that kind of thing. So anyway, all right. Are there any other questions? If not, I would entertain a mover and seconder for the confirmatory bylaw. Councillor Lamb moves. Councillor Gorham Matthews seconds. All those in favor? Thank you. That's carried. And adjournment at 9:07 p.m. Moved by Councillor McEwen, seconded by Councillor Gorham Matthews. All in favor? Okay, thank you. We are adjourned until October 18th, I believe. Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening.